Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's press conference. So, why are we here? We are here to discuss about the NITDA Code of Practice. We're here to discuss the state of freedom of expression in Nigeria, where we are at the moment, and where we are headed to. We all know how important this digital age is when it comes to freedom of expression and the issue of security when it comes to freedom of expression. These are closely linked. So we need to discuss about this, and that's why we are here today.
This is Paradigm Initiative's press statement on the NITDA's Code of Practice. Freedom of expression is a universal human right, a right fundamental to a democratic society, which is why it is enshrined in Section 39 of the Constitution and Article 19 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, UDHR. Freedom of expression is important for an inclusive participation in society. It also allows citizens to seek out and circulate information, ideas, comments, and opinions, and hold those in authority to account. This right extends to the press, which provides the platform for multiple voices to be heard. The principle of freedom of expression and human rights must apply not only to traditional media, but also to the internet and all types of emerging media platforms, which will contribute to development, democracy, and dialogue. We acknowledge that it is not an unfettered right, and there are legal safeguards to protect those who may be vulnerable and prevent the abuse of these rights. However, around the world, there are governments and those wielding power who find many ways to obstruct it. The Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, the ECOWAS Court reimposed the importance of this right with their recent judgment on the Twitter ban, where it held that access to Twitter, being one of the social media platform of choice to receive, disseminate, and impart information, is one such derivative right that is complementary to the enjoyment of the right to freedom of expression, pursuant to the provision of Article 19, sub-Article 1 and 2, and also the Article 19 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, ICCPR. Consequently, to derogate from such a right requires lawful justification. Although the court made its position clear, the civic space, especially online, has been shrinking for some time. We saw the passing of the Cyber Crimes Act, the rejection of the Digital Rights and Freedom Bills, the initiation of the Hate Speech and Social Media Bills, and now the draft code of practice for interactive computer service platforms and internet intermediaries, and conditions for operating in Nigeria. Then our call to action goes to all stakeholders involved. First, to legislature. We call on the legislative arm of the government to pass the Digital Rights and Freedom Bill to guarantee the rights of Nigerian citizens in the digital age and to promote trust. The executive, for the executive, we call on them to engage in a broader consultation to achieve an inclusive, democratic, and right respecting approach to content and platform regulation. This consultation must be heard at a level playing field for all concerned stakeholders, including private sector, government, human rights organization, and digital rights organization. For the civil society and citizens must continue to hold government accountable and equally work together with government for better output. And for the media must remain dogged to report violations and amplify the voices of citizens who daily use digital platforms to hold the government accountable. And finally, to our fellow citizens who hold the highest office in the land, Let us continue to partake in governance and hold all and sundry accountable. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir, for that question. And initially, I was going to say that, oh, I'm not sure the question is not relevant to what we're trying to address, but you have helped in creating a nexus in how they are linked. And so, thank you very much for the brilliant question. So, what I would say is that, I mean, your question has brought to the fore why we have to protect the civic space and also the right to freedom of expression, including the right to access information, and also in terms of also protecting the media from doing their work as independently and objectively as possible. What we have now is that there is a climate of fear that has been created in Nigeria whereby journalists are not, very free to even uh, express themselves or to do their work because of intimidation, I mean, abuse, arrest of media practitioners or even people who have used social media to express their opinions about governance issues. And it appears as though we have also created a climate of fear around reportage of security situation in the country. So we live in a country whereby there is a lot of fear around being able to report around what is happening regarding the security situation in the country and to be able to also hold governments accountable in terms of what they are doing to mitigate the issue. I think with regards to a probability of a conspiracy to stop the next year's election from happening, I mean, the rumor have been flying around, and I think it's a shame that government has not even addressed it in one way or the other. And also, I think it's also a shame that the media is unable to interrogate the issues further. And that's why we need to protect the online space, which seems to be a space that is not directly susceptible to immediate clampdown, if I can put it that way. It's easier for example, for government or security agencies to come and close down a newspaper office. It's easier to withdraw the license of a broadcasting, organization like the TV stations and all of that. But it's a bit more difficult to stop people from posting what they think about these issues online. And that's why we think that that's the last frontier of expression and that it must be protected at all costs. So what I would say is that it's very important that people must be able to ask questions, interrogate the issues that you have raised, and not just in terms of being able to ask it through maybe your publication, but also being able to ask it on digital platforms where a lot of Nigerians are and where a lot of Nigerians are able to also access information. We think it's very important for not just for journalists to be able to ask questions, even for average Nigerians to be able to ask those tough questions, and also for government to also be able to use all platforms, including the traditional media platforms and including the digital spaces, to be able to address Nigerians about these issues. Number one, to assure Nigeria that there is no such plan to sabotage the upcoming election. Number two, to give Nigeria, an update regarding what is being done around the security challenges that is facing the country. But most important, to also assure Nigerians that the digital space will be protected, that government will not shrink the space, there will not be a repeat of what we saw with the Twitter ban last year in terms of every frontier, every platform of expression that citizens are using. And if there was any doubt regarding the importance or the significance of platforms like Twitter, like the Facebook, like other social media platforms, to enjoyment of our fundamental right for expression and to access information, I think the ECOWAS court has put that matter to rest. In its judgment, it clearly, acknowledged the importance of those platforms, and government needs to respect that. So I'm just going to say that from our own perspective and with regards to the work that we do and the conversation we've come to have today, what I would say is that those expressions, those questions that journalists wants to ask, they must be confident that they can ask those questions without facing any consequences. And that's part of the conversation in terms of protection of the digital civic space. Yeah, I don't think that is as difficult as it looks because we are not talking about a new bill that needs to be drafted. It's an existing bill. In fact, it's a bill that has gone through the parliament before in the 8th National Assembly, and it's also a bill that currently sits at the National Assembly. And you know that when the National Assembly passes a bill, the president only has 30 days to assent to it. So if they can pass it even before the end of the year, the president will still have like 5 months next year to make a decision, which he by the way, has to make within a month. So I don't think it's a lot of difficulty around that. I feel that what just needs to happen is for the National Assembly to prioritize the bill. If the National Assembly prioritizes the bill, it's a bill that can be passed. That's the National Assembly bit. It can be passed under 2-3 months because it's not a new bill. It's a bill that has been roundly, well debated at the National Assembly. So I don't see the challenge, but I see in practicality what you are, trying to flag in terms of how it may be difficult sometimes to go through the legislative ordeals in a very short period of time. But we have also seen examples of bills that didn't take up to 3 months to pass. It's about the political will. So if the political will is there, we are more than confident that this will not take forever to pass. But it's just for the National Assembly to do their own part, and then we know, because sometimes when you make a blanket to action to government, it is not helpful when you don't clearly define the role of each arms of government. The National Assembly has their own responsibility, which is to pass the bill, but the executive then has a responsibility in terms of signing the bill into law. So that's why we pointedly ask the National Assembly to do their own part, and also you cannot also ask the executive or the president to sign the bill into law when it has not been passed by the National Assembly. That's why there is a focus on National Assembly to first pass the bill, then so that we can focus our own advocacy to the president in terms of having him sign the bill into law. So, yeah, I know it's tough, but it's not impossible. Well, it's election period, and I mean, one of the biggest criticism of politicians is that they don't care really about the people; they care about the next election, and it's an opportunity for us to mainstream the conversation now that we know that they need the people in terms of voting them in elections. To also say the people need you to do this. So I think it's a good time to bring that conversation to the table and bargain for some sort of, I mean, it's also something we can do, civil society organization can also do as part of election strategy, to say that any candidate that is not going to give us the type of legislation we want, we are not voting for you. So I think it's also a strategic time to bring the conversation to the table. Yeah, I'll assume that you asked that question within the context of the community of practice, the NITDA code, right? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thanks for the question. I think when we talk about human rights, for example, it's not just human rights for the citizens or for the media. It's everybody, including even people in government, because no matter what, even for those who are probably protected by immunity right now, they will be out of that place one day, and the human rights should also apply to them. Also, a public official should also feel a sense that the law protects them as well. Now, in terms of content, there has to also be fairness and equity. So, for example, if there is a content that I find offensive as a citizen, would I unilaterally ask the platform to remove it without going through any process? I wouldn't. The same way, if there's a content that the government finds maybe offensive, or they think that it's a wrong information and all of that, the government should not have blanket power to just tell platform remove that content. You know what that portends? That's very dangerous. What it means is that government will be the arbiter of truth. They will determine what can stay and what can go off, and that's what we don't want. We want a clear process around how do we determine which content should be taken off. For example, there has to be clear processes around it that align with the principle of democracy, rule of law, and most importantly, participatory governance. So, and that's one of the issues we also want to bring to the fore, in terms of it is not enough for a government agency to come up with a code and say this is what we determine how platforms and content are regulated. Every one of us need to be on that table, and not just to be on the table, but to need to be on the table on a level playing field where everybody's voices and opinions will matter. And the advantage of that process is that it helps us to ensure that we create a proper system of accountability, so that what happened with regards to Twitter ban, where the Minister of Information just woke up one morning and said, I'm banning this platform, never happens again. Even if there is a strong case against a platform, there has to be a due process of law in terms of how you can hold that platform accountable, not just to order, the suspension of a platform just because somebody is angry or somebody's ego is bruised. We are a democracy. We are not a monarchy whereby the king's words are final. No, we are in a democracy. Anything that has to be done must be provided by law. And I take you back to the ECOWAS judgment. That was exactly what the judgment emphasized. The judgment did say that that decision was not backed by law. It was not a legal decision, because there is no law that authorized the government to have taken that decision. So the legitimacy, the legality of that decision was questioned by the court and was declared unlawful. So that's exactly what we are saying regarding content platform moderation. It has to be lawful. And the process of coming up with the appropriate law or regulation around that must be participatory. Everybody must contribute to that process, which is why we're also saying that we don't want it to be secondary regulation. Let it go to the National Assembly where we can have rigorous debate about how this should be done. So I'll start by saying that from the statement you would see that we started by indicating what the constitutional provision regarding freedom of expression is. We also made reference to international instruments that are provided for right to freedom of expression. Also, in the same statement, we did allude to the fact that there are also provisions for limitations in very special circumstances limitation to those rights in special circumstances. But what we are emphasizing is that the limitations to freedom of expression are also provided by law. For example, Section 45 of the Constitution is where you have such limitation listed. And in the international instruments that are cited here, such as the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, it's clearly stated that limitation to freedom of expression or to human rights generally has to be, it has to pass through some very tests, three important tests: the test of legality, the test of necessity, and the test of proportionality. So in terms of legality, that limitation has to be provided for by law. In other words, if you are going to limit the right to freedom of expression, there has to be a right that empowers you to, there has to be a law rather that empowers you to limit that specific right. That's number one. Also, there has to be necessity. You have to prove that this is necessary, right? You have to be able to justify that what we're about to do is necessary, is something that we can't do without. Because if you don't do it, the nation will crumble or the world will come to an end. You have to justify that. Then the third is type of proportionality, which is to say that, so you want to limit a right, for example, and I'm going to give a perfect example. A newspaper, maybe an online newspaper, has published a particular content government deemed very harmful or can incite violence in the society. What would be the proportional way of addressing that issue? Should it be to take down that content or to totally banish that platform from even existing? So you accuse a platform for posting a particular article, for example, and then in your response, what you did was you totally remove that platform from existence. You totally take away the right of that platform to disseminate information. You now totally deprive citizens from accessing information from that platform. There are other options which could be very specific and targeted at the particular content that you have issues with. And even at that, we also have to go through some due process of law around determining whether that content actually it's actually harmful and probably can cause violence and all of that, because government cannot be the jury, the judge, the lawyer, the everything. It has to go through process. What does the judiciary think about? What does the court think about this cause? Because somebody can put a content out and somebody powerful there might just not like it and say, because I don't like it, it should be taken down. But the truth of the matter is that the question we need to interrogate is this content harmful? Is this content false? If the content is false, where is the rebuttal? Where is the truth? The best way to know whether a content is true or false is to, provide evidence and say that, oh, what this person has said is not true. Ask the person to bring evidence. If the person brings evidence and you have a counter evidence, you bring the counter evidence. That is how we assert what is true and what is false. It's not by the premonition or the mood of anybody who is probably powerful, who is able to probably put a phone call through to the IG or to any formation of law enforcement to say that, oh, those people have put up content, I don't like it, go and arrest them, or putting a call through to the Nigerian Communications Commission instructing them that take this particular platform down because they posted something that we don't like. So it's all about that. It's all about ensuring that there is a system around how these things are done and they pass through an international test of, that justifies that action. And what are these tests? I mentioned them earlier: legality, proportionality, and necessity.